Welcome to Books on Point. Civil society, NGOs, governments and multilateral institutions all repeatedly call for improved or good governance. Yet they seem to speak past one another. According to a new book titled Governance and the Post-Colony, governance is in danger of losing all meaning precisely because it means many things to different people in varied locations, adding that it's especially true in sub-Saharan Africa. But we're joined by David Evarett, who edited the book, and he's also the head of Wits School of Governance. David, thank you so much for your time. So let's talk about the book. I mean, it's titled Governance and the Post-Colony Views from Africa. Why write the book or put it together?
The book was in large part a response to, oddly enough, to the Fees Must Fall protests. The students laid down quite a strong challenge, which is a free quality education, but also a decolonial or decolonized education. And when you start asking yourself, what does that mean? Are there textbooks, are there guides, are there ways in which I can find out? The answer was nothing in our field. There may be in others. And so we decided to produce the book so that we could actually take their demand forward and begin to have an argument about what governance could mean in a decolonized or a post-colonial context.
So I mentioned in my intro that governance means various things to different people. Why do we have these different definitions of what governance is?
You know, I think the argument we make in the book is that governance is potentially very powerful. It's a very democratic impulse, and it's the point at which power meets accountability. That's where the kind of governance moment occurs, and that's how you stop impunity. And of course there are a great many players, be they corporates, be they countries, be they multilateral institutions, who have quite a vested interest in not being held accountable, who like laying down the rules for the rest of us. And so they produce more and more and more definitions of governance, more and more dashboards and data sets and all this stuff. And the meaning of governance begins to disappear. And so people like Francis Fukuyama, who was at my school, and I'm a very nice man, but nonetheless, in his definition, he said, you don't need to have liberal democracy in here at all. This is really about, can government deliver services efficiently? And that is a terrifying notion, because that's kind of Mussolini getting the trains to run on time. So it means don't worry about the politics, you just deliver services and everything will be okay. We thought you can't possibly argue that in a post-colonial perspective. Right. So we took them on.
What's the relationship between governance and then when you look at it in the lens of power, context and application?
I mean, that's the heart of it, and it's whether you want to put it in the context of power or you don't. And I think what we've argued and there's a whole series of chapters by multiple authors, but all of us argue essentially that if you take governance and power away from each other, governance means nothing. It's a set of auditing rules, or it's compliance, it's tick box. It's only when you analyze governance in the context of power, of decision making, of the extent to which people are heard, of transparency about the rules of the game, only then does governance actually have value or add value.
Let's talk about that process, because you mentioned that you're getting different viewpoints from various authors as well. What was the process like of putting together this book?
Well, they say that working with academics is like herding cats, and editing a book of academics is like herding even more cats. It was a long process, but I think it was long and tough because there were very few guides. It's not as if we're writing the next one and there's a whole body of literature behind us. We were trying to find what we wanted to say from scratch. And so we also went through at least 5 or 6 different iterations of external peer review edits, which is what academics rely on, just outsiders telling you, this is rubbish or this is not. And Wits University Press, who published it for us, also put it through 2 very rigorous external readers. So it was a long process, and I hope what that means is that there aren't too many glaring errors in it.
What's your assessment of governance in South Africa and perhaps even Gauteng, which is, I think, chapter 13 that you focus on?
Yes, here we are on Friday the 13th, and I wrote chapter 13. I think governance is, again, governance, if you see it as the role that government is playing, I think government at the moment is battling to find exactly what it's meant to be doing. I think the level of protest and the level of unhappiness amongst the citizenry has left government saying, but we keep delivering all these services to you, why aren't you happy? And I think what that final chapter says is that government's taken the easy route in many cases. It was an important route. So giving people houses, giving people running water, flush toilets and so on is important. important. But the real challenge to make governance work is to deal with this stuff, between your ears, to change how we as citizens understand each other, understand our role in society, understand power, understand accountability. And I think because we fail to really grapple with the stuff that's going on in our minds, government is left grasping. They're kind of trying to say, what services can I give you that will placate you? But they're not understanding that what we need is to be spoken to like adults and have things explained to us and be able to argue back. And I think that's really what's lacking at the moment.
All right. On that note, then, I think over the past couple of years, there's been a huge focus on corporate governance, whether you look at what's happened with companies on the JSE or even globally. Your assessment then of corporate governance in South Africa and what we can do to be able to, I suppose, be in line. And maybe you can take some of it from the conversations you may have had with other business leaders.
I'm not a big fan of corporate governance, nor am I a big fan of corporates, so I'm quite biased in this. I think that corporate governance is obviously very important. I think Mervyn King's done some really interesting work, so I think the King Codes are really important documents. But the question is whether corporates tick box, in other words, they simply comply, or whether they embrace governance and try and do business differently. Right. And when I look around and I see how much cash is sitting in the reserves of the big corporates, and they refuse to invest it in South Africa, they're allowing capital to flow out of the country, I really worry that the corporates are playing a corporate game, but they're not playing a domestic growth game or a democratic game that is aimed at trying to build a new South Africa. And I think that's where corporate governance loses the political economy question. It focuses purely on the rules of the game for corporates. But they're playing in a political sphere, and they should acknowledge that and do it accordingly.
All right, and just quickly, who is this book aimed at?
It's aimed at anyone who wants to have a good argument.
Short and sweet. With that, David, thank you so much for your time. Well, this week's recommended book is titled Everything You Need to Know About the Music Industry. From Apple to YouTube, Google Play to Spotify, the music industry has seen monumental changes in the past decades. Record labels have had to adapt to the demand for instantly accessible, low-cost music, whilst coping with significant increases in music piracy. And in this book, music lawyer Donald Passman draws upon his experience to provide a clear-eyed explanation of how to create, sell, share, and protect your music. Well, that's it from me. Nompumelelo Siziba will be back with more news at the top of the hour. Your weather is up next. Goodbye.
Good afternoon and warm welcome to the weather desk. For today we have a cold front which is over the eastern parts. We do have some isolated showers and rain in places of KwaZulu-Natal as well as the extreme eastern parts of the Eastern Cape. Also some showers and rain can be expected along that southern coastline between Plettenberg Bay going to Port Alfred for this afternoon. Otherwise clear skies are expected over the central and the northern parts for today and tomorrow. Now tomorrow that cold front exits the country. We now have some drizzle and fog patches over that northeastern escarpment. Mostly partly cloudy conditions can be expected in the south. Warm temperatures can be expected in the north. Now the South African Weather Service has issued out a warning of extremely high fire danger conditions that's over the eastern parts of the country due to very hot, dry and windy conditions. Now tomorrow that warning for high fire danger conditions moves to the eastern half of the Northwest province. So please do not start any unnecessary fires in those areas. Now taking a look at our temperatures for today, we are expecting cool to warm temperatures but very cold in the southern interior of the Northern Cape with Sutherland at 11, Calvinia will peak at 16. Warmer temperatures in the central parts, Johannesburg at 29, hot in Pretoria today with a maximum of 32 degrees. Along the coastal areas, we are expecting cool temperatures. Port St. John's at 19, eThekwini will peak at 21. Cold temperatures there over the central interior, DR at 1 degrees, -3 at Sutherland. Also very cool temperatures in the north, Johannesburg at 11, Pretoria at 12. I'll leave you there with the weather. Do stay tuned to SABC.
Coletta Njohi for SABC News in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Leon Sanyange, SABC News, Entebbe, Uganda.
Chris Ochamringa, SABC News, Beni, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Sarah Kemani for SABC News in Accra, Ghana.
Phil Ihaza, SABC News, Abuja.
Daniel Kijo, SABC, Dar es Salaam.
What recourse do these individuals or entities have against the public protector?
Desiree, the question is how was this information acquired? Who leaked it? But I guess that those people should have legal recourse.
We are quite worried about the contempt violation of the public protector provision. If information is just leaked in this form, that further erodes the integrity of that particular office.
How easy or difficult is it to get rid of a public protector?
It's very difficult to get rid of the public protector. The very nature of her job is such that she needs to have tenure security in order to discharge her functions without fear or favor.
Do you feel that this conversation is taking the country forward?
It is, because the public protector is not doing anything wrong.
You're locked on to the SA Today desk.
Thank you so much for staying with us as we continue to tell your story.
Mr. Mashaba joins us now in studio. Welcome to the program.
No, thank you very much for the invitation.
So much will be discussed, and I believe it's not your last visit to our studio, sir.
I hope not.
Well, that's it from me, Flo Ladwaba, and the rest of the team here on SA Today.
It's 2 p.m. Central African time. You're watching On Point with your local, international and business news. I'm Nompumelelo Losizibe. Let's take a quick look at the headlines. Protesters in Sandton say they will remain outside the JSE until they've received a more desirable response from the exchange. They're protesting against the current wave of gender-based violence. The family of former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe has confirmed that he will be buried at Heroes Acre in the capital Harare on a date yet to be announced. About 300 more Nigerians are expected to be repatriated back home tomorrow.